Hello and welcome to the What's the Story podcast. I'm Jarlath Cowan.
And I'm Victoria Houston. Each week we'll be focusing on the stories that matter to you. Stories about the people and places that make Tyrone so special.
The What's the Story podcast is brought to you by the Northwest News Group, who also print our much-loved newspapers, the Ulster Herald, Strabane Chronicle and the Tyrone Herald. Enjoy the show.
The main focus of this episode is an interview with legendary entertainer Frank Chisum, who for many years was Ireland's best-known Elvis impersonator. However, we couldn't let the sad news this week of the death of another much-loved local performer pass without mention.
John Tagert was known to many locals as Mr. Entertainer. After leaving school, he performed with the Powermen Show Band, where he played alongside Frank Chisum. In the late 1960s, John formed The Colours alongside Bobby Moore and Liam Nugent. They were one of the first local groups to break into the Northwest's pub and hotel circuit, and John also fronted several successful show bands before going solo in the 1980s. He also took his talents far beyond Tyrone, playing to packed houses in New York and Chicago, and was often encouraged to turn fully professional. I spoke with Liam Nugent this week about his old friend and bandmate.
I know John since he was a kid because his sister is married to my brother. So we kind of, we knew each other growing up, and then we started the wee band. I can't remember what year it was, tell you through 67, 68. We played all over all around the country here. We would have went as far as Derry and Enniskillen and all around Strabane, played in pubs, and we played before big bands and things like that. He never really pushed himself, and he was the best entertainer ever come out of Omagh. There's no doubt about it. John was happy-go-lucky, You know what I mean? He was good at what he'd done, and that's all he cared about.
Many tributes were paid to John at his funeral this week, most notably from his own brother, who gave a wonderful speech about John and his life and the kind of person he was. You can read more about that in this week's Ulster Herald.
Yes, there were lovely tributes to John Tagert, who died earlier this week. As you said, Jarlath, John performed with Frank Chisum in their younger days. So tell me a little bit about Frank before we hear your interview with him.
Yes, Victoria. Well, this year marks 30 years since Frank officially retired after nearly 3 decades on stage as one of the most sought-after Elvis impersonators in Ireland and beyond. For many of our local listeners, a man like Frank truly needs no introduction. We spoke of his early life growing up in Omagh and starting his first band, right through until the heights of his success from the late 1970s until the mid-90s, and his decision to retire in 1995. This was a truly insightful chat with one of Omagh's finest entertainers, so stay tuned for more. Just check that wee mic there, Frank, just see if you're...
Hello, hello, hello. Mary had a little lamb. She also had a bear.
Frank Chisum, how are we doing today?
How am I doing today? Moving and grooving. Feeling very relaxed, and thanks for having me here.
Not a problem at all, Frank. It's great to have you here. So the reason I've brought you in today is I was going through the archives of the Ulster Herald online, and I seen that on Boxing Day 1994, it was reported that New Year's Eve would be your last performance as an Elvis impersonator, as you were famously known through... It was the 1980s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought it would be great to just talk to you and reflect on sort of your life in music at this point. And I thought I'd dig deeper into the archives and take a couple of notes. We'll have a wee chat here, just starting from the early days, and then if you're happy enough to fill in the blanks, and we'll go from there. So,
not a problem.
Digging back, Frank, the earliest sort of indication of any thing in the paper with your name attached to it was the Pebbles.
Yes.
Now, would that have been your first band, and what age would you have been?
I'd have been maybe 19 or 20 back then. And Tom McElhone, God rest him, he wanted to be the manager. Tom had an accountancy business. So he said, listen, there's a gig in Knocknamo, Saturday night dine and dance, some nice music, etc., etc. So we had to go out and do an interview, set up the gear, and it was a Mr. Kern, very prim, very proper. So we set up down in the main bar lounge, and we did a couple of the Everly Brothers numbers, did a couple of Elvis numbers, nice and quiet. And he came up and he says, yes, that'd be quite suitable.
Brilliant. So from even as early on as that, there was a couple of Elvis numbers always doing the rounds. So
funny, it's as I was telling Connor, and there was an Elvis song at the time on the charts called "The Love Machine." So there was 3 singers. Desi could sing, so could Seamus, and I wasn't really a singer back then. I was more into just playing guitar and trying to get the thing right. And he said, Seamus said, no, I don't want to do that there. And Desi says, no, it's not for me. Will you do it? I say, okay. So I learned the Love Machine and did it. And that night then in Eddie McGinn's was a Saturday night. We did the Love Machine. So before the night was over, I had to do it 2 or 3 more times. Requests came up. So anytime we were about, we had to do this Elvis song. So we decided to do a few more. One thing led to another.
I believe it turned in eventually then to like a mini Elvis
Yes.
sort of section in the set.
Seamus came up one day and says, why don't we do an Elvis spectacular, bring in a few extra men and blah, 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 a couple of girl singers. And the Duddy twins at the time were doing a circuit of their own. Approached them, yes, love to do it. So our first gig was in the Barlin Basket back then. Colin Devlin, he was running the place. It was later McElroy's. Cut a long story short, we had the gear set up, sitting over in Stroll Park, chatting about the show, what we're going to do, what we're not going to do. Phone rang. It was young Tony Lynott, who was the roadie back then. You need to get up here, he says. They're queued from the chapel down and from Brook Street up. And you taking? No, he says, I'm deadly serious. So we were due to go on about 10 o'clock, and we had to go on an hour earlier because the people were getting restless outside.
And at this point, was it a full-blown Elvis show, or was this still
This was more or less, this was the first of the Elvis Spectacular with the girls, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So it was rough and ready because we were just finding our feet, you know.
Brilliant. And even sort of before the Pebbles or anything, growing up as a young man, would you have been much of an Elvis fan, or was this something that just through playing in the band you found? I
didn't know that Elvis existed until one Saturday there was a football match in St. Patrick's Park. And I remember when you went into the park, you went over, and there was real wee sleepers or big things, that were the seats. I was only, 10 or maybe 11. And this guy said, hi fellas, that young man looks like a young Elvis.
Brilliant.
I remember going home and telling my mum, so they said I looked a bit like Elvis. I, who's Elvis? And that was it. I never thought any more about it, never did anything about it. I can still see that Saturday morning.
What year are you talking there, roughly?
Oh, well, I was at school. That would have been back maybe in 57, so maybe a wee bit later.
Just peak Elvis had really got a...
Pardon me?
Elvis was really dominating in those days.
Yes,
sure.
but I mean, then I heard, remember, you probably were too young to remember, Sam McConnell's Chip Shop. You know where the back of the post office is? Where the lighthouse, or there's a beauty parlour there now, or where the is it the way in?
Oh, the way in, yeah. It's just
that used to be the Labour Hall was there where the St. Eugene's band rehearsed, And Sam McConnell had a chip shop, and you had the big jukebox on the wall. And Latest Flame was always played. All the Elvis songs were always played. Those were really good days.
Those were
Pardon
the days,
me.
I'm sure. And just going through the archive notes that I'd taken too, I believe, I'm not too sure if it was a brief stint or what the story was. I was going to ask you, you had joined the Royal Show Band in 1971.
Yeah. The Pebbles were playing up in Desi Dorman's Lounge in Maherafelt. That was the big, it would have been the McGinns of Omagh.
Yeah.
And we landed up and played. There was a raffle during the show, or the Pebbles playing. And I noticed these three guys when we come back on the stage. And I knew they were strangers. Cut a long story short, when the gig was over, this guy came over and he said, "My name is Michael Coppinger. I'm the band leader with the Royal Show Band. This is Connie Lynch, the manager. This is Eddie Sullivan, the trumpet player." Okay. We wondered, would you fancy being lead singer with the Royal? Because Brenton, he formed another band called the Big Eight, and they're going to Vegas. So I give them a phone number and they said, "We'll be in touch." So they did. I did an audition and out in Eddie McGinn's with the mic, without the mic, to see how strong the voice was. In the midst of all that, a bomb went off up the country. You never seen three fellas heading for the door as quick in your life. Nobody else passed a bit remarks because an odd bang here and there was part and parcel. They come back in and said, "Listen, there's a contract, take a look at it, we'll be in touch," and away they went again. Charlie McBride looked at the contract, it was for 75 punts a week. Charlie says, "Chizzy, stick out for 100. So we did. I was getting 100 punts per week, or punts. But I had to buy a new car because the main place was in Dublin. Josie McGlone's at Dromore, Datsun 1400, overhead cam, £1,015, brand new car.
1,015.
That's it.
That'd be a deposit nowadays for a car.
AGA 1838 was the number.
Still figuring ahead. So the next part, leading on from just the Royal Show Band era, from 1972 through to 73, in the Ulster Herald particularly, there started popping up adverts for just Frank Chisum performing on his own. Would that have been a kind of... were you doing the sort of pub circuit at that point?
I formed a group, it's called Frank Chisum and the Fashion. You know, because once I came back from the Royal and the Pebbles had moved on and got different people in, etc., etc. So we were doing the pub circuit with the Fashion. My dad, I remember, we had a trailer. My dad done the signwriting on the side of it. God love him, he was really good at signwriting.
Brilliant. And who would have been in the Fashion with you? Who was band
Jackie
members?
Prentice would be on bass. Jackie was a Guinness rep. Charlie Fox, that was my sister's husband, he was in drums. And we did the circuit around, and some memories really good, you know.
Yeah.
Some really good memories.
You don't know the good old days until you're
Yes.
looking back on them, as they say. So leading in then, Frank, to the early 80s, it's, according to the archive anyway, it's you're first listed as Frank Chisum as Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. So that was coming into the 80s. So I believe it was sort of prior to Elvis's death, with the Pebbles and with your thing you were doing, there was always a bit of Elvis throughout the set list there.
Mm-hmm.
Following the death of Elvis in 1977, yes, you had said initially that you didn't want to be going for the full-blown Elvis tribute act just because it seemed, I'm sure, a little insensitive at the time.
Yes. I thought it wouldn't be the proper thing to do, you know. And then a few months passed and somebody said, why didn't you do a tribute to the man? Mm-hmm. Do one tribute, so that couldn't be disrespectful. So I did one, and one led to two, two led to three. 19 and a half years later,
you were still...
I had taken it as far as I could take it. I'd done all the GI and I think, I didn't want to take it any further because I had done most of it, you know.
Yeah. And
I was getting older and I didn't have much time for the family because, you know, the band scene, the family suffers, you know.
Yeah.
Heading to Killarney, you know, next stop America and all these different places. The managers were throwing darts at the map.
Just hoping.
So that was that. And most of it I enjoyed. It was really good. I learnt a lot, met a lot of nice people. Met Charlie Hodge, met Jerry Lee Lewis.
You met Jerry Lee Lewis?
Yes.
Wow.
Jerry Lee Lewis. We were doing a thing and Name That Tune in RTE. And Jerry Lee Lewis was on the piano. I was sitting beside him. And the RTE orchestra pianist was over on the other side with some other guy doing that. And Jerry Lewis kept looking at me. He says, I know you. And he played away, and we named this and named that. When the thing was over, I lifted the guitar. I says, do you mind? Okay, you go ahead. And I played the guitar, and he played. That's the bit they should have recorded.
Why so?
But they missed it. This was just after they had done
just
the
oh,
thing.
just you mean just it was a
Jerry,
bit more loose?
I mean,
I was waiting for a punchline or something there.
the man was unbelievable piano player, and that bit they should have recorded, but they didn't.
It's a shame.
But anyway, then I met Charlie Hodge. He was Elvis's right-hand man, water and scars, sang harmony, played guitar. And Jerry Anderson, I got on very well with Jerry, and Jerry...
Great fella, Jerry.
Jerry says to me, hey, Chisum, will I tell you something? You did me a favour one night. You got me home when I was feeling no pain. I said, Jerry, it was no big deal. It was a big deal to me. There's a possibility I have a television show coming up and I'll not miss you. And he was good as his word. Elvis's anniversary is the 8th of January, 1935. The night, Jerry show went out on a Friday night, okay?
Yeah.
He rang me and he said, listen, I want you up here at 12 o'clock. Sound check. Good enough. We landed up. Sound check. Joe Clark, God rest him, was the sound man for me for a couple of years. Joe was real good. And I said, Joe, I need to hear that lick in the Wonder of You, but louder through the monitors. And this voice said, hey, Chisum, you're far too fussy. And I looked down through the lights, and here was Jerry coming up, walking with Charlie Hodge, and them smiling. Elvis's anniversary, the TV was live, there was no recording, and here was Charlie Hodge coming up to meet me.
Wow.
I could not believe it. Jerry flew him over from Memphis, didn't tell me.
Unbelievable. I'm sure that was an experience for him himself too, like to see somebody
who was
replicating Elvis to that caliber.
And I remember then, met Charlie, and the boy gave me 50 quid, and he says, look, Charlie wants to go up to this pub in Belfast, a famous pub. And Charlie and me were laughing, going up the street like we were old friends, you know, great person. During the show that night, the lick was played in the Wonder of You, I went down as usual with the scarves. I went over to Charlie Hyde's to put on a scarf, and Charlie says, I'm the one puts on the scarves. So he put the scarf on me. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was the only Elvis impersonator on the planet who got a scarf put on by the boy who put on Elvis's scarf
himself.
At that moment in time.
Amazing.
That was amazing. And then afterwards, we chatted up in the green room, and what a character. Amazing man.
And had you ever any contact with him since? Or
No,
was
no,
that just
no.
very much a one-off, just you got
it.
to experience that, and that was that? It's nearly better that way. It's like a...
Yes.
You know, just like a wonderful memory, I suppose.
And then I had a lovely surprise. And it was Connor, my grandson, who engineered this through Paul McDivitt and Highland Radio. I said, you know, I'd love to see Eddie Dunbar or meet him again, or maybe get a call. So a couple of weeks later, Connor says, Granda, keep your phone handy. Bit of a surprise. So think about a week, or maybe 3 weeks later, one Monday evening, phone call. Adrian Dunbar. Eddie, you're deadly, you're serious? Oh yes. We chatted about going to America, we chatted about this, we chatted about that for about, 25 minutes.
And what would the connection with Dunbar have been back in the day?
Eddie Dunbar, we were looking for a bass player back in the day. We're in Enniskillen doing auditions up in the, what do you call it? What's the hotel in Enniskillen? Heads away. Anyway.
It'll come to me as soon as we stop recording.
And this fella came in, his hair sort of wet. He says, listen, I'm sorry, I was doing a bit of drama up in the school. And I wouldn't be a great bass player, and I wouldn't be a great singer, but I would need the job.
Great confidence in himself.
So I said, that'll do me. The fellow was honest and upfront.
That's it.
And I liked him straight away. So then his boss in the abattoir said one Monday morning, Eddie, is there the job or the band? And on an interview with some lady, he says, I'm glad I took the band. And Eddie joined the band. We went to America together with the band. And
so what year is it then hitting America? Are you talking?
70s. It would have been coming up on the 80s.
Into the early 80s?
Around that now. I wouldn't be 100% sure.
Yeah. And what sort of grounds did you cover in America?
We were playing in a place up in the Bronx called Dirty Nelly's, spelled D-U-R-T-Y, for a man called Phil Delaney. 6 weeks.
Residency in the same venue then? Brilliant.
Wow. And Eddie, we hired a limo to pick some of the other guys up because they couldn't make it in the first flight. And Eddie we hired the limo for that particular hour. Eddie had the shades on. I had the pink jacket stepping out of the limo. People with cameras, click, 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 click. Walked up to the lounge called the Hawaiian Lounge, sat down, and Eddie was a star back then, you know.
In terms of even the acting, had it took off? Or
Oh, I mean,
do you mean he was just naturally...
He just was a natural.
He had it?
I had this thing. We were sitting outside a place in Hawkins Street in Dublin years later, and they couldn't get out for the traffic, and there was a young guard standing watching us. Eddie got out of the van, went over and lifted the hat off the guard, put it on himself, went out and stopped the traffic, waved us out, went back over, gave the hat to the guard, and the guard started laughing. Only Eddie could have got away with that.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I don't even know him personally by any means, but
Dunbar,
you know, he's the sort of man that would have got away with that.
Dunbar was a great, and I thanked him that night for every time since that particular audition, whether it be radio, TV, the newspaper, whatever, he always mentioned me never forgot it. So I thanked him.
It's good to see, you know, somebody with such a career as his in acting, I suppose, that they always remember their roots in that sense.
It was nice for a movie star to be ringing me to say hello.
Amazing.
So thanks to Connor and to Paul McDivitt.
Was there a point when he was in the band then where he had to maybe step out and say, look, the acting's taken off, or what way did that kind of fizzle?
Yes, no,
through?
he was up front. He said, listen, I have an audition over in London to say, Eddie, listen, you have go with my full, the best of luck. So please let me know how it goes. So a week later he rang me, says, listen, I'm accepted and I'm going to study acting. Says I, listen.
Go for it.
Go for it.
Nice one.
And he never forgot.
So just talking about America there with Hughes doing the residency in the Bronx, there was another trip to America that came up when I was looking through the archives there. It was a piece in the Ulster Herald from September 1982. It was actually advertising a gig you had played in O'Hagan's in Eskra. However, it did mention in the comments that you had recently returned from Graceland, having won an Elvis lookalike competition.
Yes.
So I was looking to ask you about that. I believe, was it the Sunday World held
Yes,
it, or what was the
yes.
track there?
I stayed with Phil Delaney. That was the man who we played for. I rang Phil and said, listen, blah, blah, blah. Went down to this like an auditorium.
Was this in America?
Mm-hmm.
Aye. But did somebody, before even this took place, did somebody submit you to this competition that you won?
Joe
or what way does it work?
Joe McCadden was a manager, I think, at the time. And Joe said, listen, and this mightn't be up your street, but it'll be good publicity. There's an Elvis competition, blah, blah, blah. So go down to Dublin and do your thing. There was another young lad. He says, listen, it'll have to be a joint first with this young fella. I says, good enough.
Brilliant.
So
they flew you over then to is it Memphis, or
yeah,
isn't it? And you stayed with Phil there.
mm-hmm.
And what was the whole? I know it was a visit to Graceland, but was there was it a week, 2 weeks, or what? Do you recall?
The thing, yes, it was. There was two. This was just to visit Gracelands.
Yeah.
And then when I come back, Phil Delaney rang me and said, by the way, they're doing auditions over here for a movie called The King of Rock and Roll. He says, I'm going to put your name down so you can come over. So I went over, stayed with Phil again, down to this auditorium. And there was 26 Elvises on before me.
All auditioning for
this part.
26 years.
And the thing I couldn't figure out...
That'd be an amazing sight. Sorry to interrupt, but that'd be an amazing sight to see in a room. Just 26 Elvises.
And they all did the exact same song. I couldn't figure it out, why don't you do something different? So my turn came, I went up on stage and they said, who are you and what are you? So my name is Frank Chisum, I come from Northern Ireland. Big cheer. I said, what was the first number? So I, Suspicious Minds, same key as the record. After a few verses, this guy came up and says, do you do something else? I said, okay, now or never. A couple of verses, they come up, will you do another one? And I was starting to think, he never went up and asked any of the rest of these guys. So I said the last one, American Trilogy, same key. And he waited till the very end. And then he came up and said, by the way, take a seat down there and give the guy your details. So I was going to play the middle Elvis.
Okay. Oh, so they were a film covering his career?
Yes, well, the one was three. They wanted the young, the middle, and
then
the
the
older
older
one. And the thing, it didn't happen because to pay for the royalties for the performing rights of the songs, blah, blah, blah. It was crazy money.
Just fell apart then.
So it didn't happen. And maybe, in a sense, it was meant to be that it didn't happen, you know. I have no regrets, none whatsoever, none.
Have you seen the latest one from Baz Luhrmann, I think you call it?
No, my son David went and seen it. He says, Dad, it's really good.
It's very, I don't know, something about how it's edited together or something. It's different, so it is, but it's very, very interesting. So it is. So Frank, there was a bit of a gap then, from my notes anyway, from 82, whenever the Graceland visit was mentioned, and they were promoting that gig, as I said, just locally in O'Hagan's and Askra. Through our archives then, there was a bit of a gap, and it just jumped straight through then until 1994 to your retirement. So even coming into those later 80s, early 90s days, when you were still doing the Elvis show, was there a point? I mean, did it start feeling like you were sort of going through the motions, or even up until then, was it something you were enjoying?
As I said earlier, I had taken it through the different stages of suits, tried to copy the Vegas suits. We did a section with a GI, got the genuine GI uniform. There was an Army Navy store down in Derry, and got the exact type, his army number.
I seen a video of you wearing it yesterday. The band are all matching and all.
Yes.
And tell me this: where would you have got in those days? Where would you have been sourcing the likes of the not the cat suits, the jumpsuits, the famous jumpsuits? My
sister Deborah, God rest her, she made 2 of the suits. The rest of the suits were made by Ethel Moore. That's Ray Moore's wife. Ethel did a super job.
All locally sourced too, handmade, amazing.
Yes, and I got the belts in Memphis. The Double Eagle was the biggie, you know. She was superb hand skills, really good.
So throughout as you said, you had done all the stages of Elvis. Did it nearly feel at a point like you were even chronologically nearly replicating his career to an extent, if that makes sense?
Well, I felt I couldn't take it any further. I had went through most of the songs of the live albums. We had played most of the gigs in Ireland that were the 2 that were big. Joe Dolan played them, Dickie Rock played them, Brenton Boyer played them. You had the Brimmer Rooms, and you had Clontarf Castle. And it was nice to be asked to do a show there. We did a week there. There's Louis Walsh, the guy who was on the...
Yes, the X Factor.
Whatever.
It's all them. He's the boy band manager.
Yes, so Louis Walsh and Joe McCadden were really good friends. Helen Shapiro was booked to play the Brimmer Rooms, and Louis rang and said, listen, Helen's tickets are not selling. Would Chisum be interested in doing a double act? I says, Joe, not a problem. So once Louis took over the posters, Louis bought all the poster space back then in Dublin. If you needed a poster up, you had to pay Louis Walsh money.
Louis was the man.
Oh, he was a shrewd man. Once the posters were up, the tickets started to move, so it was sold out for the week.
Yourself with Joe Dolan?
No, and Helen Shapiro.
Oh, right. I misunderstood that.
So Helen, we were doing a sound check, and we did it, and her and her band stood, and they applauded us, and we applauded them. Helen did her a few hits back and when. Then she went into the jazz kick, which the audience weren't really interested in jazz.
Yeah.
So
that takes us through then, as I said, too, just when you announced, as it was put in the Ulster Herald at the time, you hung up the blue suede shoes.
Yes.
For want of a better headline.
Yes.
So it was no secret that you wanted to retire, spend more time with the family, like a lot of musicians on the road do. So I suppose those first few months after, like I know there was the likes of July 1995 there, you were listed to perform in the Royal Arms, which would have been after you announced the retirement, but there was still yourself as Elvis with John Tagert as Neil Diamond. So obviously you were still dipping the toes in a wee bit and here and there, but did just come off the road. Was it a transitional period in the sense, like, how did you cope with it?
No. My big passion was salmon fishing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was telling Connor last night when we were coming down from Castleblinny, I said, sometimes on the stages, I'd be, when the band would be taking a lick, or I'd be changing my suit in the dressing room for the next section. I'd been hoping the water and the Strood would have been in good order for salmon fishing.
That's always in your head then for the next day.
And then I had no illusions about being Elvis. There was I was telling Connor, one guy, a DJ in Dublin, said, listen, it must have been some time when you really thought you were Elvis.
Yeah, you get so into it.
And I looked at him and said, I'm surprised that a man of your intelligence would ask a question like that. Let me put it this way. The easiest thing in life I find is to be oneself, and I enjoy being me. So I am doing an act, same as an actor, putting on a suit. My lines were songs. That's it. And I said the same. I was thinking of salmon fishing sometimes on the stage. And people were ringing in saying, fair Jews, he put him in his box.
That's it, yeah.
You know.
You're going to have, they probably thought you were going to come in doing the whole thank you very much.
Yes.
Listen up.
Oh, stop.
Did you ever get that when you were meeting people? Did they nearly expect you to do the whole talk the talk? And
years later, people said, we expect you to have the shades and your sideburns. I said, hold on a minute. What age do you think I am, you know? So I'm a pensioner nearly. And no, there was no transition. I was into my fishing, and then I got a job up in the Sacred Heart College.
What were you doing up there then?
When Kevin Nixon got me the job, he said, listen, we're looking for a design and technology technician. Oh, go back. Said, hold on, Mr. Nixon. Haven't you got hand skills? I said, I have. That's what we want. He says, it's a nice title, but we need hand skills. The two guys we had in here before, on paper, geniuses. But they sat in front of a computer, blah, blah, blah. Hand skills wouldn't have been their forte.
Brilliant, so it worked out.
So 25 years later, I'm still there.
You're still there to this day?
And I love every minute of it.
Brilliant. Frank, so come March 1997, the Pebbles reunited, the original three-piece, I believe.
Yes.
In aid of cancer research. Tell us about that. I mean, I'm sure after the whole whirlwind of doing the Elvis show for all those years, to sort of come back to your roots in that sense was a bit of a treat, I'm sure.
We rehearsed. It was to raise money for cancer. And there was no question about reforming for that. And we rehearsed and did that night in the Village Inn. And needless to say, it was packed for a real good cause. And then we did a few more gigs. Eddie Scott, the oil man, we did a gig for him. And did another one I opened the golf club for the 1999 into 2000, you know.
The New Year's Eve sort of shindig, was it then?
And to the...
She's brought in the new millennium together, reunited as a band right. Then. That's nice. And would you have been doing the same at that point? Did you sort of just pick up where you left off, still doing the old sort of 60s Beatles, Stones kind of thing? Or?
Well, we did, and there was a couple in between. It went okay. Nice memories, really nice memories, you know.
And then the last thing I have on the list is July 97. There was an ad, 2 for the show, yourself as a 2-piece with Seamus McGuigan. Mm-hmm. Now, I'd done some laughing yesterday. I was watching a couple of bits old footage, and they were talking about how when you started doing the 2-piece, you just wanted to do the pub circuit and that, like any of us do. And Seamus says you would struggle to get bookings because people's lounges weren't big enough for what they thought the crowd, Mr. Frank Chisum, would pull. So I'm sure that was a great, in a way, like a compliment, but a frustrating situation at the same time.
Seamus tried to get through to different places. Listen, this is not an Elvis show. But they said, oh, but aren't you going to do Elvis songs? I says, yes, we have a good Dolly mixture program. And we'll do George Jones, Merle Haggard, blah, blah, blah. A couple Elvis songs, etc., etc. Okay, so we played a gig in Enniskillen. Place was chock-a-block. We did a gig in the Fair Trees in Strabane, chock-a-block for a two-piece.
Brilliant.
And we did a couple of Elvis songs, and people were up saying, you shouldn't have given it up, and and which was nice,
Yeah, that's it. So it's just to wrap it up, I suppose, as you were saying, people were saying you shouldn't have given it up, but I'm sure at this point there's no chance of you ever digging the old blue suede shoes out and going for it again.
As I said to different people, and I'll say it to you, and listen, thanks for having us here.
No problem, thanks
Connor
for coming.
Sitting in the wings here, and I said, I had my time in the sunshine, and now it's Connor's turn.
Amazing.
That's it.
And Connor's fairly carrying the torch anyway. We've had him in before, and he has the voice for it.
Oh, he has a superb range for a young man, who had no band experience, stage experience, walked on, blew them away.
First time I met and heard Connor, he had said, because of the connection to yourself, Connor was very, no, I'm not an Elvis tribute singer. I'm not an Elvis tribute singer. And I was like, right, cool, fair enough. He got up and sang his song, and I remember just looking at you straight away and going, like it or not, you're an Elvis tribute singer. You've got the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree there. So, Frank, thank you very much for coming in. It's been a pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you, Jarlath.
And all the best with whatever you may have coming up. I know you've recently had a bit of a celebration in the Stroll, so long may it last.
Well, and I want to say thanks for Connor, because we're like a duet, it's nice to have him beside me when we're doing this or doing that, because he is part of what's happening now,
Yeah.
And it's nice to be asked,
That's it.
And
Thank you very much,
Connor,
Frank.
as well.